but you are never trained to think about how could we be in 5 to 10 years? What would we need to do so? So, but at the end, some of the well-trained managers come in executive positions, but now their mission would be different, namely to give direction, but they never learned it before.
Hi, this is your project management cowboy coming back to you with podcast 21. My favorite number. Nobody cares. I thought I'd just throw that in there. You might say, hey, Mark, what do you want today? You seem a little bit energetic, a little bit over the top. I will tell you why. The purpose of our podcast is not only to entertain, but also to educate and also create a community of practice amongst people who are out there doing what both my guests and I do, and sometimes struggling to convince other people that they're doing the right thing, okay? We're creating a community of practice based on the principle we read or we communicate or we share to know we're not alone. In the last couple podcasts, we've had kind of the luxury to go through some of the bingo terms of the moment. We went through agile topics. We went through artificial intelligence. We kind of catered to the momentary buzz or hypes that are out there. I'm really, really thrilled because today we're coming back home. I just picked up an interesting quote not too long ago, and I thought it was really good, and it matches this podcast. It says, if you want to learn something new, don't invent something new, read an old book. I have the pleasure today to have a guest with me, Markus Brandstätter, a long-time colleague.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
He will have the opportunity to introduce himself so that you know who the heck he is and what justifies him saying what he's going to say. And he's got a lot of good things to say.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is the topic of project portfolio management. Mm-hmm. Not a new terminology, but let me ask you right up front. Well, you want to give us a formal definition of what a project portfolio is for those who are saying that?
A formal definition or my private one?
But both?
The formal would be that you optimize the resources of a company to achieve strategic goals. Mm-hmm. My personal definition would be to get first an understanding where the company wants to go to. Yeah. So really develop a strategy and then put the portfolio together, not only how most of the people would do it, optimizing the resources, but on the other hand side, really optimize them in a way to achieve the strategic goals.
So we're getting confusing already. Don't worry, we're going to clear this up.
Yeah.
Markus is brilliant when it comes to this. I would add my definition of a project portfolio is you have individual projects. If you lump them together, then they're coordinated projects. They become programs. If you take the sum of your projects and programs at an organization, that is your portfolio. Now, portfolio, we'll talk about this later on, doesn't originally come from project management. It comes from finance. But there's a relationship to finance, and there's another portfolio we're going to talk about, which is product portfolios. We're going to be talking about the triumvirate, how these three things interact. But before we get ahead of ourselves, like I said, I love to, when I look at podcasts, the number one thing that annoys me, and when I'm listening to somebody who sounds interesting, is I ask the question, who the heck is this person? I want to know what their background is, what justifies them, what angle they're coming from. So Markus, it's tradition in our podcast that our guests get to introduce themselves. I've forewarned you.
Yeah,
right?
You did.
So why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your background? Where did you come from? What did you study? You have a very illustrious career.
No.
You have to give credit where credit is due.
Oh, thank you very much, but it's not that special.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
What did I do? I started studying economics and informatics at the University in Vienna. Afterwards, hired at IBM. Because in those days, IBM was really this big company and you could go there, learn there, do so, and so on.
It was the gold standard for everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was at the beginning of the 21st century, not 21st. Well, this were also the days when we met the first time because IBM invested in their people, and I had the honor to do the PMI certification.
Yes.
Then, that's why we met.
Yes.
But then there was in 2003 or 4, I guess, the first, let's say, decrease in employees at IBM because business was not going that well. So I went away from IBM and came to Raiffeisen, where I stayed then for a pretty long time, I guess about more than 10 years.
As a point of reference, Raiffeisen, or RBI as it's sometimes called, the mother company, is one of the largest banks in Central Eastern Europe and one of the biggest banks in Austria with a long tradition.
Absolutely. And in those days, by the way, it did not exist as Raiffeisen Bank International because it was founded in the late 2007-8, I guess. Yeah.
So you actually got to participate in that East expansion where they...
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started there as a project manager. And then there was a little bit of luck, let's say, in the game, because there came a topic up which was quite important out of regulatory circumstances. It was Basel II. And this is also the reason why I came in touch with all the Eastern European banks from.
So you had to align with Basel II in headquarters, and then you had to go to the 7, 9 different national subsidiaries that you had throughout Central Eastern Europe.
We had 16.
16.
In total.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I did not do the head office stuff. This was another team. But a colleague and myself did it for all the network units. So did it mean I turned from a project manager formally to a program manager. We had local projects there and brought them into compliance over a time, I guess, of close to 3 years. And finally had the successful sign-off from the Austrian National Bank on this, which was required to proceed for the bank and keep their banking license.
So a highly strategic, valuable, and important, essential project.
Absolutely. When this was finished, I raised the question, what should I do now? But in the years besides that, I also continued my studies and completed my doctorates also in informatics and economics. And the topic was portfolio management. So
very good.
I guess the baseline why we come to the topic today. And what I made up my mind is what you were questioning before, namely how to structure a portfolio and a project portfolio, not a product portfolio, a project portfolio, to gain the most value for the company out of it. And when we're talking about value, I'm not talking about the value in a period from 1 year, for example, to maximize the turnover or whatever, but really to maximize the come out for the development of the company over the next decades, to make them ready.
So not just short-term or mid-term, but actually long-term planning.
Absolutely. And when starting this, and I guess we'll come to this back a little bit later, is I also raised my mind, how do I know or what are the criteria to structure it to make them long-term?
Okay. I think that's going to be a hot topic,
We'll come back to it later. Just finishing the CV then, so I raised the wish to the management in Raiffeisen to let me take the results from my studies and introduce them into the work life. For various reasons, this did not, I would say, succeed.
How come? Well, it could have succeeded, they just didn't want it, right?
In those days, I believed I was not in the position to communicate it properly.
Okay.
Years later, looking at the same situation various times in my experience later on, it shows that none of or very rare CEOs or board members of the companies I was working with really do want to implement strategy.
And we're going to talk about that. I think that's really a hot topic.
We'll come to it, and also for the reasons, But then going on in the career, so I dropped out at Raiffeisen then because I didn't see any chance to fulfill also the wish in me.
Your development.
To implement it. So next logical step was go into the consulting. So now, as I came from the financial industry, there was a consulting company also searching for consultants which were specialized of only banking consultants in Europe, and really with a large ones like Deutsche Bank, DK Bank. So not to do too much advertising, but just to see what their customers were. Yeah. So I've been with them some years to repeat the experience I've mentioned before with Thriversen. Everybody says, yes, we want it.
Yeah.
And when you are with them and working with them and they learn what it means, there is a lot of fear in the air. Yeah. And there are suddenly many meetings and we need to leave earlier and which is, maybe we're coming later back to this as well.
We will.
Also, I think one of the reasons in our culture why we are losing currently against Asian countries and also compared to the US, because our mindset is a completely different one.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll be interested to hear what your opinion on that is. Good.
Yeah, and finally I dropped out there as well because I didn't see a future just being in the narrowed down hallways. And then started my, let's say, personal career as a consultant. And since then, I've been working with several countries and doing strategy development, not only in the financial sector, but also. And really bringing people or organizations in the position to define their strategy first. In the second step, see how they can break it down into a roadmap for the next years. And third step, and here we're coming back to portfolio management again, how to implement it, as a matter of fact. And of course, all the disciplines coming at the end with program management, project management. But honestly speaking, in the level of program management and project management, I have not been now for some years.
Don't worry, I'll cover that angle. We'll create the bridge between it, because you, on the other hand, I'm very, very comfortable. By the way, if you haven't noticed yet, project portfolio is my favorite topic. It's my absolute favorite topic. I have different exposure to it, maybe from a little bit of a lower in the hierarchy angle of it. I push bottom up, and you have the benefit of pushing top down, but I think there'll be a good exchange here. Let's kind of start off. I want to kind of start off every podcast that I conceive of. I look at the guests and I look at what they're good at, and then I kind of try to create a topic and a premise around that topic. And one of the things that I say is, if you're out there struggling to figure out how in a global market you're going to stay competitively viable, if you want to be the head of a game, yes, artificial intelligence is relevant, but I think there's a long road before it has the relevance that everybody thinks it will. Agile is, in my opinion, valuable, but not the only thing. Those are low-hanging fruits. This is an expectation of anybody who's well-trained or has a long experience in project management. Is the immediate assumption is project management is only a means to an end. It's a small puzzle piece in a big puzzle. And the big puzzle is portfolio management. That having been said, my personal consulting experience, and I'd love to hear what you're going to say on this, is you can see it if you look at PMI, if you look at the standard, I think that the 3 books that make up the PMBOK guide are like this thick, almost 900 pages. If you look at the guide, the BOK guide for programs, it's about this big. And if you look at the portfolio one, it's about this big. And it's really difficult to get good books on PMO. I have a couple. There's a French author. I'm hoping to get him in my podcast as well. We'll make some recommendations towards the end of the podcast. But to bring it to the point, I think project portfolio management is essential to the competitive viability of a modern organization. That having been said, if I look at the sum of the many, many, many companies that you and I have had the privilege of working for, only a small percentage understand it and do it. They might do it informally, but they don't do it formally, and there's a huge loss of synergy and impact because they do it informally. So I'm a big fan of keeping it simple. For those of you who are still struggling to get a pragmatic understanding, this is what I do, and maybe you do the same thing. When I meet an executive at a cocktail party or something, or we're doing networking or something, they might ask me what I do, and I say, I'm a process expert for projects, program, and portfolio management. The last two words I usually don't hear. They go, and stuff like that. And then we'll get into the conversation. Yeah, my company does project management. I says, yeah, I would be surprised if it didn't. And then I say this. And they said, well, and I said, well, how do you do portfolio management? I kind of get this answer, right? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Can you tell me how many projects you have at the moment in this year? And they kind of pulled back. And I said, can you tell me what your total budget for projects are? Can you tell me what the breakdown of what budgets are in what projects, which ones are classic for-profit, which are more strategic, which are more governance, right? Do you have a PMO? Yeah, we have a PMO. What kind of PMO is it? Is it operational or strategic? And I usually lose them there. So this is the purpose of this podcast, is to make a clear understanding. What the hell is portfolio management? What can you give it? Why do you need it? And one of the reasons why we have you here is what are the first steps or the medium steps that I need to do to create portfolio management? So let me ask you, from what I said, would you agree with me? What's your experience? How many companies out there do you know that actually really live full potential project portfolio management?
Honestly speaking, in my understanding of how it should be, so the ideal world,
okay,
0.
So that's like asking you, how many bullseyes have you seen in your life, and you're going to say 0. So so we have to look at quality as a range. How many even hit the dartboard?
3 to 5%.
That low?
Yes.
The others are not throwing at all, or they're throwing in the wrong direction?
No.
Okay.
One thing I would amend to what you were saying before.
Okay.
I think one of the difficulties is for leaders in general. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you look at the company, let's say from a structural point of view, yeah, you have what we call the run the business. So there are the processes. There are terms like process management, process optimization, whatever. Yeah. This is not the change part. This is the running part.
Yeah, that's the functional line organization.
Exactly.
Which still exists, even though people might call it something else.
Yeah. Whatever word you're going to choose, it's fine. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you need to execute processes to get your money. Simplified said. Yeah. On the other hand side, we have the topic where project program management comes in, namely in the field of change the business. Yeah.
Or extraordinary things where there is no standard process. Level of volatility, level of uncertainty, level of complexity, level of we don't know what the hell we're talking about, nicely called ambiguity, right? Okay.
Exactly. When it comes now to portfolio management, we are talking in one sentence. What to change in the run the business organization or in the process organization, if you want to, and what are the topics we address or we need to execute in the change the business part of the organization to influence the RTB at the end.
RTB?
Run the business,
yes,
I said before. So RTB, run the business, CTB, change the business.
Okay.
Yeah. And we are coming, when we want to put it in a nutshell, you could also say portfolio management is what do we need to do? Project management and program management, on the other hand, tell you how to do it. And that's important. But to make the decision, what are the topics we are going to focus on and why, is the much harder thing.
Let me throw something into the mix here, because I'd like to hear your opinion on it. I think we'll agree, but maybe you can add a little bit to it. You'll never accept or adopt a topic unless you know why you're going to do it, right? So let me ask you, maybe we can get to my points by asking some questions. There's a lot of questions, the bottom of the organization is always looking to the top and sometimes asking themselves, they're always complaining, they're not doing the right thing, I don't think that most people are even aware of what the function of an executive is.
Very good point.
What would you say are the 2-3 I think there's two, but there's probably a couple more. What are the basic functions of an executive? What is their function? For all you executives out there who are wondering, what the hell, why do I need to know something about portfolio management? Why should I be listening to these two? What is their core function?
The one I would see or the one I recognize they take?
Let's start off with the one you see, and then let's answer the second question.
Okay. The one I would see is an executive needs a clear vision, and here is a word we need to define maybe a little bit later on. Yeah. Where the company should be in a defined period of time. Yeah. This is the first thing. Yeah. With having this precise vision, the next step would be.
Can I throw in, because we're totally in line. Let me give you. I try to sometimes deliver it with humor. I say I believe and say the same thing, and I say this is the most difficult thing of an executive. Because if you look at, for example, Apple, you look at Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, they were famous for vision. Mm-hmm. Okay. But it's a rarity to find an executive that really understands vision, because what is vision at its core? Vision is in the absence of knowing what the hell I'm talking about. Let me repeat myself. In the absence of knowing what the hell I'm talking about, which means fully embracing my Tao, my dumbest assumed user that I am as a CEO, which needs a huge amount of humility. I accept the fact I know less than the rest of my organization, but I still have the capability, the innate intuition to understand the big picture and say, you might be the experts, but I'm the captain of the ship. Mm-hmm. We're sailing here. Exactly. With absolute conviction. Yeah. That is almost an esoteric quality. That's almost a ethereal, almost religious thing that is almost impossible to learn with an academic education. And I think most CEOs are scared shitless.
Honestly questioning, as you have also a lot of experience with CEOs, yeah? How many do you know that really have a clear vision for the company they are working for, where it should be for, let's say, in 5 or 10 years?
I would say... I wouldn't say that I can, right off the top of my head, think of a representative sample. I don't know if my thought. I would say recently of people where I was impressed, maybe that's an easier question. How many CEOs impress me with that quality? Mm-hmm. 5, maybe 10%. Mm-hmm. And I'm being generous.
Would be my impression as well.
I would be generous.
Would we also like to talk, or would we like to elaborate a little bit on what's the reason for it? Because that's a cultural issue in my understanding.
Well, let's talk about what is the cultural reason from your experience?
Look at the contracts leaders have today. Yeah, normally. Yeah, they are defined by the win the company does in, let's say, 1 to 3 years. Yeah. When we talk about developing an organization and realizing a vision, sorry, we are not in 1 to 3 years. That's impossible.
You know what was we're on the same alignment. I used to be a big fan of Harvard Business Review. I used to have even the German and the English version of it. When many decades ago, Harvard Business School came out with the concept of shareholder value, I thought it was a great financing model, but I thought it was the downfall of strategy. Because it reduces not qualitative aspects to quantitative. It prioritizes quantitative.
Yes.
And that's why if you look at a lot of CEOs today, I'm going to go back to this vision thing. Do you remember the Jack Welch and the books that he came out with? Every CEO that you ever worked for, it used to read Jack Welch's book, and he was an absolute visionary. Absolutely. He wasn't always right with his vision, but he was a great visionary. And because nobody else had vision, and because he was such an icon, 90% of the executives that you and I know read his book and copied off him. They cheated. It was a cheat sheet. If I want to improve my numbers, fire a bunch of people. If I want to improve my product portfolio, because I'm not ingenious, I'm not creative, then if you're not number 1 or number 2 in the market, sell it. And
at the end, nobody cares. Because, sorry, if you're gone after 3 years, They are looking at their banking
Short-term.
account and say, okay,
Short-term,
I have
short-term.
my money, whatever comes, who cares?
So, sorry to interrupt you, but that's just such a powerful thing that I think that it kind of goes over the head. And I want to say, and I think to make a very simple example, Steve Jobs didn't know how to code, was not an engineer.
No.
He was famous for doing fonts. He was basically a graphic designer,
Yeah.
but a abnormally creative, visionary individual. When everybody else started, when IBM sold their laptops to Lenovo, when HP said, screw laptops, nobody wants, Apple put their foot down and said, no, the vision is people will still pay a lot for laptops, but not the laptops you're selling. And if you look at Tim Cook today, he's the other extreme. You know, he's a great manager, but he's not a visionary. So let's go back to that was the first point. Go ahead.
Sorry, a very important differentiation. Yeah. A manager and a visionary. Yeah. Unbelievable. We have lots of good managers, but they do not develop anything further.
Yeah.
We need visionaries.
You need to be comfortable with the unknown. You need to say, listen, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I know what I'm talking about. When Steve Jobs walked into his famous engineers meeting, and I'm sure their brains exploded, he walked in with a pack of cigarettes after having a cigarette break and said, I have an idea. And they go, really? What's your idea? I want a device that's about this big where I can put all my music on. All the engineers, I thought inside they were probably exploding and said, oh my God, we work for a sociopathic narcissist who's an idiot. He doesn't know anything about engineering. It's impossible. You can't do that. The concept, the paradigm shift of going from physical medium to electronical medium, how's that going to work?
Yeah.
But he was an extraordinary visionary. He had other faults, but he was great. So that's the first quality, which I think the very few executives. What's the second function, or the third even, for executives as far as what their purpose is concerned?
Well, the second thing is when they have the vision, the next step would be to think how or what do we need to do to make this vision become reality. This is what we normally have in the term, and we are back to terms now, what is called strategy. Yeah.
Because a vision doesn't happen by itself.
Exactly.
Just saying what your vision is. Yeah.
And here we are coming to the next point where I see with most of the executives a lack of understanding for the companies they're working for.
Yeah.
Namely, most of them, and I would go here for Pareto with 80-20, do not know the value chains of the company.
Important word.
So in other words, how does the company I'm manager there or a board member there, yeah? How do we earn our money? And not on a level, let's saying, well, we are a bank, we are selling loans, yeah? No, I'm really talking about the value chain.
Yeah, value chain is something we need to go into greater detail because I think a lot of people have heard it, but they don't really know what it means. I think, and we're going to go into depth what it means as an executive to have a vision. Vision is always at the top. I don't know if you've ever heard this statistic, but it's one of my favorite statistics that I picked up also from Harvard Business School. There was an article that I read 100 years ago where, actually, no, it was from Stephen Covey that I read this from. He said that he did a questionnaire with a lot of the senior executives that he worked with. Mm-hmm. And his standard question was, do you guys have a vision? And do you have a mission? And they were like, of course we do. By the way, I still ask this question of a lot of my clients today, right? And then you might ask, do they have principles and values and stuff like that? And of course we do. And then the next question was, well, how many of your employees actually know what it is, right? Now, this was a long time ago before there was internet. So, nowadays you just Google it, right? And the executive said, yeah, I'm like a minimum of 90% of our staff eat, breathe, sleep our mission and vision. It's the most essential thing,
of course,
there is. At least this was in the 90s. People used to say this, right? And then they did a questionnaire with the employees, and like 15% of them actually knew what the vision of the mission was. Okay? Mm-hmm. Which I think is a powerful statement. I think the real problem is not that people, I think the number one complaint that I hear about staff members, about their executives, is they don't see them, they don't feel them, and they don't know where they're going. That's the purpose. That's this. Nelly, what was the wonderful word that you used? The business mystic. This ethereal quality to be like, when everybody is in doubt, to say, no, I got your back. Trust me, this is where we're going. And I think people also politically are looking for that, even if the people who are telling them that they have a vision don't know where they're going. The second element, which I think is going to lead in also to our portfolio thought, when you're talking about value changes like this is my second criteria, is they're the business keepers. They're the caretakers of an institution, of a corporation, which means they have fiscal, financial responsibility.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, and this is short term, but also midterm and long term, the job of an executive, regardless of what they know or do not know, is to observe, control, monitor, and steer a company in such a direction that it makes money at the end of the year.
Exactly.
And I would say, in reality, I think, in my opinion, unless you have something you would want to add, I think those are the two key responsibilities of an executive.
I would like to amend something what you just said. Yeah, you were talking just about vision and mission. The interesting experience I make quite often is if I come into a new company and are going to talk about the mission and vision with the executive, it is very often the case that they mix both up.
It happens all the time.
So
what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yes, but not also what comes up first, but also about the understanding what is what.
Yeah. Okay, do you want to give it? You want to give it a shot?
Yes.
Because I think this would be valuable to the viewers.
And I would invite everybody. Go to famous companies who have their mission and vision statements in the internet, and look them up if the definition I'm bringing right now fits to what you're going to read there. And I will have a bet that most of them you will read there will not comply with what I'm saying. Now you could say, well, I'm simply wrong. Yes, this would be, let's say, a possibility, but I'm just claiming the definitions that had done by the guys who developed the Balanced Scorecard, so Kaplan, Norton, and Merton, who did, as I think, a very good definition of it. So what is the definition? The definition is, they say the mission statement tells you why the company exists. So why does it need the company? This is the mission statement. In comparison, the vision statement always has a precise point in time in the future where describe how you expect the company.
What is the future state?
You mean how long the period is?
No, isn't vision like, and I think vision is a lot of people feel it also, a vision has to be that's kind of how you're saying, there has to be a fixed milestone. I don't know if visions always hit a direct milestone. I think they keep moving out. But the idea is, if we look at where we are today, where are we going to be in the future? That for me, and painting a picture of what we're going to feel like, look like, and be like.
Coming back to Steve Jobs. There was a vision of Apple. I don't know the year by heart, but he said by the year, it was somewhere in the 1990s, we are the leading company in bringing new IT. That's how he defined it in those days. And look what he did. He was one of the rare persons taking this vision, bringing it to the whole staff, and then breaking it down in strategic steps, saying, okay, what do we need to do to achieve this goal?
See, what you're alluding to is exactly this whole purpose, because portfolio management and program management and project management is the roadmap to achieving it. I think also Steve Jobs, this is also a quote that supposedly comes from him, I love it. When he was once fired from Apple and came back, I forget who the CEO was that got him fired. I think he came from HP or something.
Honestly, I don't remember it as well.
But and when Steve Jobs came back after being fired, he gloriously sat in his office, and with a certain amount of humor, he said he reflected on why they had to bring him back, and he said, the problem with most senior managers and executives, they think that the idea is 90% of the work. And that's what the problem with a lot of visions. A lot of people say, all I have to do is write a vision and then just put it underneath my pillow, and while I sleep at night, it's going to realize itself. And I think what we're going to be talking about to a great extent, also using the Balanced Scorecard method, is if you look at the organization as a pyramid, the vision is at the top, although you can argue if it's mission or vision first, right? Then mission. You're still, as important and as valuable as I think they're essential. I think you need them. But the other opposite side of vision and mission is they're still hot air.
Of course.
Until you convert them, right? Until you say, okay, what's our strategy? What are our strategy blocks? And then you start defining program. Now we're talking project management. Then you start defining programs and you start defining projects that are operationally, those are the operational puzzle pieces to realize your big puzzle.
And maybe we also elaborate a little bit why this is the case, why our observation is the way it is. The reason is, if you look at careers, how they go, you start in a small position, Well, you learn management.
And it's shut up and listen, obey, command and obey,
Exactly, but you are never trained to think about how could we be in 5 to 10 years? What would we need to do so? But at the end, some of the well-trained managers come in executive positions. But now their mission would be different, namely to give direction, but they never learned it before. And this is, in my understanding and in my experience, what we are lacking in our economy in general. Because our executives are, or most of them, are not leaders. They are
great administrators.
Exactly, that's very
great
well.
And I think, and I'm sorry that we keep using these simple examples because they're placative. But I mean, Steve Jobs might have had his fault, but he was a great visionary. I think the problem with visionaries is they often don't tolerate other visionaries.
Yes.
They want people who are yes men around them. And then you have, and Tim Cook is a great executive by many standards. But I'm going to say something very blunt. And I used to be a great Apple fan. I still respect the company to a certain extent. But I'm going to say something very blunt. Apple has had no major, for me, perceivable innovation since Steve Jobs died.
Agreed.
You know, removing the jack on a phone, or putting a button on the side, or just changing the color, or just charging more, or you know, now you have to buy the battery pack or whatever you have to buy extra. That's not innovation, right?
I would like to suggest something.
Yes, go ahead.
So that we are not only complaining about what's not going well. Yeah,
we're critical, but we're constructively critical.
Absolutely, because maybe we come a little bit later on that we show a kind of a roadmap.
Please.
How it could be done.
Absolutely.
Because what we are saying up to now is, well, most of the companies do not have a mission or a strategy that's worth the name. But we could, and we defined already what would be in those two terms, good ones. But I would also go the next step and saying, how do we bring, if we have a vision and we have a mission, how do we bring it down and, let's say, plan the development of the company over the next years so that we can achieve it. So in other words, operationalize.
I would absolutely love to do that, and I'm counting on you to guide us through. So that also using show us with the tool of a balanced scorecard how you can use that kind of as a cornerstone of breaking it down. Maybe there's just one conceptual thing that I want to kind of bring across so that we've set the foundation for our discussion. Let's talk about the word portfolio, because that's going to be in the background until towards the end, where we say, and to do all this, you need portfolio management. So let's define portfolios. The second responsibility of executives is financial responsibility, falls under the broad terminology weighted average cost of capital management or financial portfolio management. Financial portfolio management is when an executive says, my company is worth $100 million at the beginning of the year, how much is it worth at the end of the year? And this is one of the most important KPIs for his bonus and for all success criteria.
And we cover this as well.
Okay.
Because what we are going to see is we will not only be in the position to describe or plan the development of a company, because as we are using value chains, as we were mentioning before, we will also plan the financial outputs. And that's something that can then work together with the, let's say, standardized models of how to pay managers. That those targets become the criteria in their contracts. So everything goes hand in hand.
So let's clarify. Financial responsibility, fiscal responsibility, hugely important. Mechanical, you would say, well, what? That's financial portfolio man. That's not a project responsibility. That's financial officer, CFO. But let's go a step further, because this is the link that we're trying to create. You're going to talk a lot about strategy. There are 3 portfolios that everybody should be aware of, but I'm not always sure that they are, and how they work together. You have a financial portfolio, which means if I have 100 million, if the company's worth 100 million, and if I have 10 million to invest, how much of it am I reinvesting in my company? Because how does a company make money? It makes money by selling products, which is the second portfolio. Products. So anybody who knows anything about product management, right? Product portfolios, and then you have the Booz Allen Hamilton matrix, where you have the old terminology. You have a question mark, shooting star, cash cow, dead dog. Those are the old words. I'm an old fart, so I'm going to use those words, right?
Where we are to bring it back to what we started before in the RTB, in the run the business section,
which is and if I would add a third element to what an executive is responsible for, is to be kind of the overall umbrella manager of have an awareness of what the product. And Steve Jobs was a great example of this, right? Bill Gates was a great, Elon Musk, to say, you know what? And I heard this conversation really recently where somebody said, you know what? I'm not going to go to my engineers and ask them what great innovations they make. That's the wrong way to do it. I need to go to the market and ask them what is the next innovation that we can sell to the market. And then I go to the engineers, and then you have to match the two things. So that's the second portfolio that you need to manage, because the classical Nokia effect that you want to avoid is that you're a huge reputable company, but then you lose the innovation curve, and before you know it, you're gone.
And to bring it just to one, point with Nokia, what was Nokia's problem? They didn't have a vision. They made very good products, no question about it. But the next evolution.
They at certain points they chose to go in the wrong direction, because they did. I actually did some work for Nokia a long time ago in the training sector. I was actually in their innovation shop, and they actually had a smartphone. Just it was an executive decision not to go in that direction. Everybody, that's one thing that Apple was good on under Steve Jobs. When everybody was going in one direction, he said, no, we're going in this direction. And he managed to push it through. So those are the 2, financial portfolio and product portfolios. The problem is, and you talked about change beforehand. You're not a bank, so you're not making money with money. You have to take the money and you have to invest it to make products. But making a product requires research and development, has a lot of uncertainty, needs focus, needs cross-functional teams, needs people who think outside the box. And that's where the third portfolio comes in. That's the in-between. That's the bridge between the financial portfolio and the product portfolio. So I have money, I invest it in projects. And research and development project. Change. Change is an investment without a guarantee that you have a return.
Absolutely.
But the key is, even if your hit rate is 1 out of 10, like in the pharmaceutical business, 10% of the products developed in pharmaceuticals make it to market, but they make so much money with it, that's a good business. So you have a financial portfolio, you have a project portfolio, which is projects last for a certain period of time. And when they're finished, what does a project produce? A product.
And the process, hopefully.
Hopefully a process and a product. So projects are the bridge between the financial portfolio and the product. And these are the 3 things that actually executives are responsible. So my question that I would ask executives is, listen, how many projects do you have? And I'll tell you one company, I had a podcast with this, the number one company I know, that if you ask an executive how many projects they have, they will know exactly down to the number, Siemens.
I guess so, but they are coming from an engineering point, and that's why
they're But still, even if you knew how they were a long time ago, they've come a long way. They really are dedicated to this. They understand that projects are the bridge between an investment and a future product, and also a delivery mechanism to develop to give the client their complex products, it's essential to the survival. So every executive or senior manager out there who doesn't understand their responsibility in this mix doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. So that's enough academic or structural stuff. And let's go into what you were talking about. We left off with vision and mission.
Yep.
Take us into, what do I do now as an executive? If I have a vision and mission, it's not going to work by itself. What would be the next steps? This is part of what you do from a consulting perspective.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So when you have the vision and the mission of the company, so you know what and why you're here and what you're going to do, and you know or have at least a bit of an understanding where you would like to be, let's say in 5 years, in 10 years from now. Yeah. The next step would be to think about, well, what do we need to do to achieve this vision? Yeah. So then the question is, well, if we want to plan how we develop, wouldn't we need to understand first how we are functioning or how we are working from a functions perspective today? So how do we make money today? Okay.
Well, I would say, maybe Fred, my question was, what are our present day capabilities? And I think if you're looking for change, you wouldn't just focus on the obvious ones that we're making money with, but what are other capabilities that are kind of in the background that we're not maybe
but this is the next
monetizing?
The next step.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, what I see when I'm doing consulting is that most of the companies do not even know how they are working today, or in other words, how their value chain is today.
Okay.
And just an additional sentence is, what of the things that are going on in the company are really critical for the current value chain, and what are besides which are maybe grown over the time but not really essential to the business.
Which is actually an interesting topic, because I think one of the challenges for executives, if they didn't grow up in the company, if they haven't been there for 20 years, they don't really know the culture and the product portfolio. I think this is a problem with a lot of executives. They have no idea what their capabilities or value chain is. So you've used the word value chain a second time.
Yep.
I'm always a big fan that we give our viewers a simple breakdown. What's a value chain, and why do I need to know what it is?
Well, my understanding of a value chain is, in one sentence first, how you create value in your company. And when going one step further, a little bit more into detail, I would say normally you have 4 layers.
Okay.
Those are also the layers of the scorecard. And I like it because it's very simple, and Kaplan, Lautner, Merton really described it to be grabbable easily.
I think a lot of people out there have seen a balanced scorecard, but very few know how to use it. That's a phenomenon.
In a short way, yeah. So on the top perspective, you have financials. Why financials? Because we are, let's say, in an economy where we want to maximize financials.
Yeah.
Okay. Where does the money come from? I do not know any trees where you can collect it. So normally you have something like a customer who gives the money to the company, right? Okay. So here we are in the second layer, the customers.
Yeah.
So are the customers just coming into the shop saying, hey, I have so much of money, please let me give it to you? Normally not, at least just besides some businesses where there are other rules, but normally not. Yeah. So what do we need to do to make customers giving money to us? Either we have a product, which we are selling, or we have processes they would like to have, like a hairdresser service, the hairdresser cutting your hair. Yeah. So in the third layer, we have processes and services. Good. But processes and services need to be done by somebody. Yeah. By anybody, sorry. Either it is really a physical person, so an employee who has the qualification to do something with a hairdresser, the guy or the lady cutting your hair, or this could also be like, let's say, a computer system or a PC.
Especially with AI. Yeah, maybe something automated.
Something automated, however it is, yeah? So doing this now, what we did from top down to the bottom up is, I need employees or computers, whatever, with certain qualifications to fulfill processes in the company to either have services provided to the customers or have products created where the customers are willing to pay for, and the payment is what we want to have in the financials area. Yeah.
So if I can summarize real quick, first question would be, what's our financial situation? What's our capitalization? How much money do we have in reserve? How much have we dedicated to research and development? What's our revenue? Are we small margin, high volume, or are we big margin, small volume? So that kind of concept. So a good, solid finance. What we said, number two responsibility of an executive. Next thing is to have a clear understanding of who our clients are, and probably also in second stage who they could be.
Yes.
All right. So
we're talking about the vision already.
Yeah. So we're talking about present state and not future state yet.
Exactly.
And then to have, this portfolio concept, is to have a clear understanding, what products do we have? What's my product matrix look like? How many cows do I have in the barn? Cash cows that are making money. How old are they? What is their shelf life? And how many things do I have in the pipeline? Because if I have nothing in the pipeline, that's what a lot of disruptive technology has done to Kodak, to Xerox, to a number of different companies that are in danger if they're always focusing on the present and not focusing on the future. So what are our products and services that generate financial benefit or value? And then the last thing you said, what is the delivery mode? Is it physical? Is it human resource? Is it automated, automated process or machinery, stuff like that? So those are the first four elements of the Balanced Scorecard.
Exactly. And please let us be precise on one thing. At the very moment, we are not talking about vision, strategy, whatever.
We're just talking about current state.
Current state, just
present state.
Understanding how are we functioning as of today. And here, just as an experience, if you go on this level of detail, and we are really high, I would say also Pareto principle again, 80% of the CEOs or board members don't have a clue. Yeah.
I want to disagree with you, but for some reason, the first examples that are popping up in my head, I would have to say I'd have to agree with you. I don't want to agree with you, but I feel I have plenty of cases where I would have to.
From a consulting point of view, this is often really an issue because they ask me, come to us, make a strategy with us and tell us how to implement the strategy. And I'm often going there and say, well, of course, I'd like to. But before we start talking about vision and strategy, please explain me how you are or how your value chains are as of today. Yeah.
And so this four elements of the Balanced Scorecard is what the preliminary part of the value chain from you. Okay.
So also just of an experience, if I'm starting with companies working on that, the first year, we normally do not do anything on strategy.
Okay.
And also not on vision.
So what you're basically saying, if you want to change something, the first thing you need to know is you need to know where you are before you take out the map and start making a plan of where you're going. Which makes sense if from a logistical standpoint, or from a coordination standpoint, because if you don't know what your financial means are, if you don't know what your client base wants or tolerates, if you don't know what products you have and how good your products are, if you don't know the quality of your delivery model, how are you going to project what your future state is supposed to be? And so you say that this sometimes takes you up to a year to even establish.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And here comes the first conflict with the management normally. Because at this point in time, they realize, okay, when it takes it, if we're fast, 1 year to really understand how our value chain is, then we need some time to develop a vision that fits and need to think how or what do we need to change to evolve the company to this new vision. And then they think about their personal contracts and they see, hold on, my contract is over even before we start doing strategy or implementing the strategy.
I'm telling you, I think shareholder value, that's the reason why shareholder value is such a catastrophic impact on modern business, is because I say is the only advantage that the company has of sharing a share is in the first transaction when you get the money. After that, you are a slave to the shareholder. The shareholder doesn't really give a crap what you do. They don't understand what you do. The only thing is, am I getting my 10% or 5% or 3% dividend or whatever it might be, or an increase in value, which creates an incredible short-term mania amongst executives. And that's why a lot of these short-term executives, there was a famous one in the 90s called Buzzsaw something or other. He used to go in the company. He said, I know how to fix the books. If I want to increase the value of the company, I fire 1,000 employees. It's going to screw the company midterm and long term. It's going to ruin our productivity, but short term, it's going to look good on the books, right?
Yep.
Good.
And
not good, but
and to jump in on this, but this is the issue because what we need to understand is if we want to develop a company strategically, we need to do an investment first, and then gain the higher results.
Can I hear you, and I think it's so important what you say. I want to kind of maybe say it from a different perspective to maybe broaden it even. I think most executives feel much more comfortable with the quantitative element. They academically, it's something you can learn. You can go to university for. That's what I have an MBA for. That's what I went for business school for. I can learn how to crunch balance sheets. I know I can use all sorts of KPIs and I can do wonderful graphs and numbers don't lie and what can't be measured can't be improved. This quantitative approach is incredibly essential, but it completely leaves out the, for me, higher order aspect, which is that business mystic that we're looking for, which is, do you have a strategy? So we were talking about strategy. You mentioned before we started with the podcast, and I had the smile when you said it, Balanced Scorecard is as old as the hills.
Yes.
I have a great book on it. I love it. I think the problem is, like with so many things, decision trees and Ishikawa diagrams, everybody sees it and they think they understand it. The graphic is very simple. The words are easy to use, but they're not difficult. They're kind of difficult to implement. And you once told me that Balanced Scorecards sometimes have a not so good reputation. Why is that? From what perspective?
I would go further. They have a very bad reputation.
Okay, why?
What's the reason for it? When it was introduced, the big consulting companies took it, and this was the new opening for new business in new companies. Okay, let's go. Okay, two things happened. First thing was the ones who implemented, at least it's my impression, often by themselves did not understand what they were doing. Because they made it much more complex as it is. Because the Balanced Scorecard between the two of us, from the idea behind, it's really trivial. And not lowering.
And I think sometimes when people do simple methods, then they overthink it and they add so much, then it becomes complex and it makes no sense anymore. Okay.
Exactly. And they also left the recommendations of the ones who thought it. So, for example, the number of KPIs you should use and so, there were scorecards, oh my God, you wouldn't understand it. Okay, so first thing. Second thing is that the management realized with a Balanced Scorecard, the company and the value chain really becomes transparent. But could it be the case that there were also managers in there who wouldn't have liked that to be the case because this would make transparent their inability, sorry to be that precise.
Or what they don't know.
Whatever.
And they weren't comfortable with that. I've had that experience several times. I mean, we all know the paradox. Everybody loves the word transparency. If you see the word transparency, it's like saying the word agile. Everybody gets like a semi-mental orgasm. But if you start trying to be transparent, everybody gets uncomfortable, right? Partly because they're afraid themselves of what they might see. So everybody emotionally understands the value of transparency. Now, but let's go back to the Balanced Scorecard, because regardless, even if, I don't care if it has a bad reputation, because if you don't use this Balanced Scorecard, some new consultant is going to come along and create a new model, which is basically the same thing, give it a new name, and then there's going to be a big hype, like with many of the things we have today.
I just wanted to say that.
But it's pretty much the same thing. So why reinvent the wheel? Let's stick to the Balanced Scorecard. But we left off with you saying one of the big challenges that most people underestimate is most people think, I can do that in an afternoon with a workshop. It doesn't work that way unless it's a small company. And even then,
not even with a small one.
So you do it to do a present state analysis, but the actual purpose of the Balanced Scorecard, the higher order purpose, is future state.
Exactly.
So take us through, and you had an example too that you wanted to share with us to show the complexity when you get into that. Okay. So we take the Balanced Scorecard now, and what do we have to do to throw that vision on the board for the future?
I had the opportunity not too long time ago to work with a company, or let's start working with a company which is also noted at the exchange.
So publicly traded,
yeah, publicly traded, right? And there the idea was, okay, we need to create a vision for the next 5 to 10 years, break it down, put it into portfolio management, please execute. And
why is it? I think you mentioned beforehand, not in before the podcast, that it was about this company where the owner died? Okay,
yeah,
so over visionary, great icon, great reputation.
He was a genius.
He was a genius.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the next generation.
So he died, and with him,
they understood we need a new goal, a new vision. Let's execute. Yeah. Okay. At the very first day when we started the workshop, everybody was really motivated. Let's do it. Let's get the goal. Okay. After the first day, when we went through how the company works as of today, we're not talking about the future. As of today,
they were still doing the present state. Okay.
It turned out the management did not know their value chain or their value chains because they have more of them. Yeah. And what I'm meaning with that is not that they did not know which products they sell. That's what they know. But how the value really is generated.
What is the secret recipe from a systemic perspective?
Exactly.
Resources, know-how, structure, facilities, vendor chains, the whole kind of thing. Okay.
And the point I want to make with it is, before you don't know how you create the value as of today, you do not need to think about what you're going to do in 10 years. Yeah. Because what you're missing is, how would you like to plan the evolution of the company if you do not know where to start from? And I know many managers saying, well, hey, that's the others. We know, come on, we know what we're doing. Yeah. But believe me, again, Pareto principle, in 80% of the companies I'm going in there, 80% say before, we know everything. And the same 80% at the end of the day see that they do not know how their value chain is at that level of detail to be in the position to think about how to
project where they could go.
Exactly.
Okay.
And also to be clear here, I'm not talking about which employee does which project step in which order.
You're not talking about process management, you're talking at a much higher level.
Exactly. I'm just adding this because I have the experience, some of the time I'm misunderstood.
Yeah, they think you're doing process optimization.
Exactly, yeah. I'm not talking about process documentation, optimization, nothing about it. Really on a high level picture, yeah. Namely also to have an impression what of the functions I do have in the company are really part of the value chain and which are those which are not. This is not the same saying I can kick out all of them with which are not in the value chain because you have regulatory needs you need to fulfill and other things which are important in the company. But when we're talking about vision, I need to know which of the areas in the companies are the ones I really need to focus on and develop to a future state.
Yeah. So your visions have to be sharp enough that there's a domino effect, that they drive you into the direction of the next things that you need to consider.
Exactly.
So it almost has a pulling effect on you. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So and then the new CEO pulled you aside and said what?
See, normally in those situations, there are two possibilities how it evolves. The first one is, and this is a very rare one, but I want to start with it, that they say, okay, we understood what you're saying. We know that this is necessary to bring the company forward, let's do it. And let's say they have a strategy development break because they understand they need to understand how they are as of today. The second possibility, and here we are again with Pareto, they recognize what's going on. They also see the need, but then there comes fear. Mm-hmm. And fear is the strongest emotion we know. Yeah. And then when you look in the eyes of those executives, you see normally the thing he or she recognizes this. Then the second thought is most of the time, how long will I be here, and what does this mean?
Do I want to rock the boat?
Yeah. And
why change a running system?
What is my personal
as long as it's running?
Result?
Let's just hype it up.
And then most of them say, well, no, we will take a shortcut, do something that has the name
outwardly.
Strategy. Yeah. So we do it formally. As a matter of fact, we do cost cutting to achieve short-time financial goals, and then we are in our pension, and the next guy who has come after me should do the job.
You know, it's always a great indication of what these types of executives do. They'll was a famous Scandinavian executive for an Austrian company. I don't know if I mentioned it. Who came in and they did a long series of cost cut. And it actually was very impressive what they did. They really did a holistic approach where they engaged all the personnel and all of the personnel on all levels were contributing small and medium and big size ideas on how to cut. And then you know what the CEO did at the end of the process, and this will probably give away what company it was. He decided to put the cherry on top of the cake after they've saved millions and he got his bonus, let's redo the corporate identity. And since they had a fleet of something, airplanes, they decided they were going to change the logo. Now, did they change the logo massively? You know what company I'm talking about, right? No. Slight change. But now do the math of how much it costs to redo the corporate identity. And I'm like, you saved millions, and at the same time, you threw out millions for a logo change that nobody even noticed.
By the way, when we're talking about strategy development, let's say giving a new corporate identity is not a strategic measure.
No, but sorry. A lot of people, if you feel addressed here, feel addressed. I won't even mention. I could list 10 companies that do this, and it always triggers me. When a new CEO comes in, their job is to understand the balanced scorecard, to understand the value chain, and not because they're clueless, let's change the logo so at least outwardly something has changed. Nothing has changed.
By the way, because you mentioned cost reduction, just to avoid the misunderstanding, I'm not saying cost reduction is a wrong approach.
Yeah.
This can be an outcome for the vision that we need to reduce costs in certain areas. Yeah. But before taking any action, I need to know where I am as of today, where do I want to go, and then we can think about the measures to take or the actions to take to gain the results or to achieve the results. We
want to say constructive, so not just complain and point fingers here, because we're part of the game. We see ourselves as active players in the attempt to do good here. I think where we have to assign some of the blame is in those that leave us. Be it either leave the company or die in this case. I think there's a huge responsibility for I think the problem with the balanced scorecard and the value chain is that in very, very dominant CEOs, the balanced scorecard is in their head.
Yes, especially in the ones who create
it is in their head, and it's kind of a semi-intuitive, semi-explicit, semi-implicit, right? And the problem is, and this is where they're also losing in efficiency, it's not transparent, it's not painted on the wall, it's not broken down into the different levels, it's not baked into the system. It is kind of baked into the system, but in a subconscious way. And this is this transparency. In reality, and this is something I challenge all good senior managers and executives to do, if you're doing a good job, the question is, if I were no longer here tomorrow, would the ship still sail, and would my staff know? Would the next guy fill my space? Am I replaceable? And I think too few companies work with this. And I think the Balanced Scorecard is a simplistic, as you mentioned it,
Absolutely.
but powerful tool
Yeah.
to paint on the wall so that everybody can see it and create transparency of what the financial, the client situation, the product services, the delivery modes, what the KPIs by which we measure it as well are. And this is what we're going to talk. We're going to tie this into project portfolio management. At the end of the day, you have to. This is a lot of work, right?
Yes.
Who's going to maintain this information? Who's going to update this information? Who's going to do quarterly reports? Who's going to make sure that the people who have decision making is in the forefront of their mind? And our proposed solution, it has to be a staff position, and the staff position, the strategic staff position, would be a strategic PMO that does portfolio management, or in PMI, as they say, operational project management, the highest level.
Agreed. Just one step before, namely when we're talking about executives and their job. Yeah. You said before, and it's absolutely right, the development and the maintenance of the strategy is not an afternoon job.
Yes.
Yeah. But sorry, that's the job of the executives, and they are paid full time doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Afterwards, when the strategy is defined, managing then is supported, of course, by the portfolio management, and the portfolio management in those terms does anything different than seeing what are the ideas we have and how do they contribute to the strategy and the vision broken down to, let's say, years to contribute.
But see, the system of transparency only works if you have multiple layers of the pyramid involved in the process, and every layer of the pyramid knows this is my job. My job is to provide the data.
Absolutely.
My job is to convert data into information. My job is to use KPIs and to identify opportunities and threats, right? Executive role will always be, I always say an executive wants to sit in an expensive car. They should know a little bit about an engine. They should know something about the overall mechanics of a car, but in reality, what they do to measure the car is they use their gut feeling, they use their foot to feel, they feel the steering wheel, they look out into the future, and they read the dashboard, right?
Absolutely.
And creating efficient dashboard, there's more work to that, as you and I know, than most companies are willing to acknowledge, and you need a staff position to do that.
And there is one amendment I would like to make to have or to enable the portfolio management in an organization is you need to provide them with the value chain so that they understand what are the values we need to measure to develop the company further, because without knowing that, they cannot select the proper projects and programs to do the optimal contribution to the important factors on the one hand side, by having on the other hand side the focus of, can we finance that? So financials. Do we have the manpower to do that? And do we have the skills to have this running? So if you want to have, or if you want to enable portfolio managers to be in the position to do their job, the executives need to provide a strategy and let them know how to measure it and which values for which criteria are asked at which point in time.
Okay. So let's get back to the Balanced Scorecard, because we left off with a present state. First stage, you do present state. What's the next approach in the strategy development? What do you do with the people that you're working with?
What I'm doing the next step is I'm selecting a year in the future, and normally I try to take, let's say, around years, so like 2030. I'm not taking 2028 because nobody remembers. So let's, for example, 2030.
Round it up, okay.
And then we develop a vision for the future. So first starting with the key components, what or where when you want to be there. So for example, if you have key competitors, you could say you are number one there. Or if you see that you need...
or what markets you're in and what markets you're not in.
Exactly. That's what I just wanted to mention. Or other specific products you want to establish which are not...
And then there's all these bingo words: vertical integration, horizontal, up and down.
So what may be important is those are all targets that are from a current point of view really far away. Yeah, so not something that is
But they
easy to gain.
define. So if I say I want to run a marathon, that's a long-term goal. But then to say, well, what's the route? What are my milestones? What is my pace? See, that's how we're breaking it down.
Exactly, and those are then the next steps. So first, we're defining 2030, and then we see how do we need to break it down in year targets to have the evolvement over time.
So do you use the word roadmap?
Yes, of course.
Funny story, a guy that I had the privilege of working, really, really nice guy. This is another phenomenon that I think you have an experience with. A lot of the PMO managers that I meet are great people. But funny enough, a lot of the PMO managers, when they become PMO managers, have no idea what the hell a PMO is, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of an accelerated coaching program that I do with them. And that's why we also have the PMO program in our online academy, is one of our biggest programs, where we try to give PMO managers all the different angles that they need. But I remember this guy said, listen, I just got selected as a PMO boss. I go, why? I said, because I've worked together with this new executive or senior vice president. I've worked with him in the halo effect. I did a good job for him then. He respects me. He said, do this. I don't know what it is. Take care of it for me. So he hired me on board and I coached him. And he says, one of the things he wants from me is he wants me to give him a roadmap. I said, well, then do. And he looked, and then he was like beating around the bush. And I go, well, give him a roadmap. And he goes, and then I said, okay, I noticed the conversation was breaking down. So I said, okay, stop talking over this guy. Listen to him. And I started asking him a couple questions. And I go, what's the challenge of making, let me ask you, do you know what a roadmap is?
Oh.
Because I thought this is an embarrassing question to ask. I didn't want to insult him. And he goes, no. and there's no harm in this. I love it. Ask me those the most straightforward questions. And then it was easy for, okay, I broke it down. A roadmap is you have a long-term goal that you set. And then you say, okay, what are intervals? Okay, in Agile, you would say, what are releases? What are part-time deliveries?
However you call it.
Okay, what are your short-term goals? What are your mid-term goals? What are your long-term goals? How are you going to measure them? When are you going to celebrate them? When are you going to show them? And what's the work that happens in between? And actually, it was a great interaction with him, and he put together a great roadmap. I will say this in his defense, he's become a sensational PMO. I'm still in contact with him every once in a while, but he hasn't asked me to coach him in a long time. He says, "Listen, Mark, you can learn from me now." But this is part of the process. Sometimes the most simple things take some time to understand.
But now we come to a very critical point, because you cannot go there and say, if you have a target in 2030, and let's say we have now 4 years to go or 6 years to go, and say, okay, the target is 100, now I'm with 10, let's break it down into 6 years and have the how it evolves over time. This doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because we didn't think about the value chain. With the value,
so a couple people go, what the hell is a value chain? So let's repeat it so they understand what the link is.
What we mentioned before when we said I need capabilities or employees to execute processes, to create products, and then have the customers buying it and then getting the financials.
Are you familiar with that book that was brought out, The Business Model?
I guess I read it. Yes,
I'll show it to you guys later.
It's some time ago. Yeah.
It's actually a very simple management canvas that, and I'll bring it out later. I think you'll smile when you see it, because it's very overlapping with this concept.
Because it's logical.
It's logical, but it takes time to digest and understand, and then ask the critical: do I even know?
But now comes the work why I need executives for, because up to now I do not need an executive. So this can be done by anybody else.
Well, I tell you, the great ideas come from everywhere. What executives are also there for, and this is one thing we forgot, they have to decide.
And now, to make the right decisions.
That's what I mean. Make the decision, whatever is right or wrong.
And also, where now the portfolio management comes into play is to see how do those value chains I have in the company interact. If I start projects or programs, whatever in the portfolio, to change some of the change in this value creation process, what are the effects to other sites? And you need to select now the changes to make the whole organization going, let's say, in the same speed. You may not overemphasize one end and underemphasize the other. And this is now when we are talking about breaking down the vision into, let's say, year slides, together with a portfolio management thinking, okay, what changes do we need to do to evolve the value change in a way that it moves as a whole and not left.
What you're saying is so deeply resonating with me because it's so much of my own personal experience. I don't know if it's coming across to the viewer, so let's maybe kind of just elaborate on it real briefly. I said before that quote, sometimes the biggest mistake of executives to think that the idea is 90% of the work. I think another mistake that kind of is a domino effect of this, hey, we're in charge, we delegate. That's our job, we delegate, which I completely agree. What a lot of people don't understand is that when you delegate to whatever level it might be, if it's a business unit leader or senior vice president, a chief of finance or a program manager or a project manager, you can delegate and that person will take responsibility. Mm-hmm. They're responsible. And you know the RACI chart is as old as the hills, right? But the biggest problem that people have with the RACI chart is the understanding of what is the difference between responsible and accountable. Because even if English is your mother tongue, it sounds pretty much the same thing, but there's a huge difference. Mm-hmm. And the huge difference is you can delegate as much as you want, but you're never off the hook. Okay? President Truman once had a famous plaque on his desk that said, "The buck stops here." A really weird English that most people who speak English don't even know what it means. It's an old pioneer statement that says, listen, if I'm the captain of the ship at the end of the day, if you do something wrong, if somebody in my organization I can hold them responsible, but I'm accountable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? I'm not off the hook. And I think this is the key to the heart of executives to understand. Listen, we're not trying to just dump on you. We're not just trying to make your life is difficult enough as it is. I have full empathy for executives. What we're trying to say is, what we don't understand is, why are you not using all of the potential capabilities and resource functions at your disposal so that you understand when you're driving the car that you have a dashboard that's legitimate. You have a warn signal that says you need to stop for gas. There's a navigation system that says, hey, listen, there's a flood ahead. Here's a faster way to go. I think what a lot of executives don't understand, they think, I'm going to give you the vision, I'm going to give you the mission, and I'm going to pull back and helicopter, right? And I'm going to fly in without knowing what you've gone through on a daily basis. For strategy to work, executives need to understand they have maybe not a daily responsibility, not even maybe a weekly responsibility, but at least a monthly or quarterly responsibility to be present and not to listen to the details. And that's a big mistake of project managers and people at lower levels. We love to cover the executives with all sorts of details, which makes them crazy. They don't want all the details. They want to have the relevant. Tell me the relevant. How much gas do we still have? Are we overheating? How far have we driven? Do we have a right pace? Is there a mechanical issue? Are the tires no longer gripping? That's what they're They don't want to know, they don't want the details, right? What's the carburetor doing? Unless it's relevant to their decision-making process.
Absolutely. And they have now, in my understanding, an additional, job to do. Namely, normally, you start off from a baseline. Yeah. Okay. Now,
Can we explain what a baseline is? Because even the word baseline, most people have differing understanding. What's a baseline from your perspective?
Okay. The baseline, when I'm talking about the development of a company, is the state, how it works as of today, in terms of processes, in terms of what workforce do I have, what are my customers, and what are the financials.
Can I congratulate you, because I'm going to be a bit of a nerd here. That is academically, semantically, vocabulary-wise, the absolute correct definition of a baseline. Baseline means the starting point. Okay, so where does the rocket ship takes off from the baseline? Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, there's semantic differences. PMI does not understand the baseline as where we start off from. In project management terminology, when we talk about a schedule baseline, a cost baseline, or a scope baseline, we're talking about the future. Just just to create. So don't get confused by the two. When we're referring to the baseline, we're talking about the starting point.
Yes.
Where does that leave us? We talked about baseline, right? And we've had conversations before, and you'd mentioned something about baseline. What do you want to share with you were going to throw something else in with the baseline?
Well, we said before how important it is to know the baseline, that you know where to work away from or where to start from.
Where to start from.
Okay, so let's imagine you invest a lot of effort really defining what the baseline is, and also determine what the effects from or the cause and the effect in the baselines are, or in the scorecard is. Yeah? Okay, great. You did this. You spent a lot of efforts in that. So the first year you're executing it, and you're starting a project with all the things you want to change and develop. It is natural that at the end of the year, you recognize on the one hand side, the project worked probably different than expected.
Yeah.
That's pretty normal.
It's based on assumptions to a certain extent.
But the more important part here, the baseline you expected to be stable turned out that your assumptions, which are in there as well, didn't work out.
Not only the baseline in the sense of balanced scorecard, but also the baseline in the sense of what your target is, where you're trying to go. There's between A and B, it's not a direct line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now we come to the point what my personal understanding of an executive is in comparison to a manager.
Yeah.
An executive needs to handle and steer all the time the deviation between what the best knowledge of the baseline is and what the current how the proceeding is.
Yeah, what the context, the environment, the conditions are.
Exactly.
The constraints are.
Exactly.
And they can change. There's always an aspect. As Niklas Nassim Taleb once said, there's always black swans, whether you want them or not. Okay, and those often provide the biggest challenge. An analogy. I'm a big fan of boxing. I like to watch boxing, and I use an analogy to kind of drive this home. And I say, if you're a heavyweight contender and you're going up against the world champion, right? What you're going to do is you're going to study them. All right, you're going to look at their previous matches. You're going to say, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And you're going to say, well, how do I have to counter that? And you're going to spend weeks, if not months, in training camp practicing that. Because if you leave everything open, your chance for success is close to zero. All right. And so this is kind of in line with the classical strategy concept and also project and program management concept. Failing to plan equals planning to fail. This is a wonderful predictive philosophy that we all love to, which drives agile people crazy because there's a paradox that you're actually addressing here. And I love to bring this because it comes from a brilliant individual, a deep philosopher from the United States, a little known African-American known Mike Tyson, who once very wisely, and he's a brilliant guy, he once said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Exactly.
Right? And I know that you've heard this 100 times from executives when there's a certain group, modern group of executives that often use the word agile as an excuse for everything. Why don't you make a plan? Because we're being agile, right? That have taken the lesson they've learned from the fact that no matter how well you plan, you're still going to get punched in the face. Is why plan then? Let's just be flexible. Let's just be agile. They don't know what the hell that means, but that's a feeling that they have. And I say that's a recipe for disaster because the paradox that we're talking about here, and on one hand, you have to have a plan, but immediately after the plan, you need to realize that there are dynamics at play that you didn't consider. Mm-hmm. And this is what we once talked about beforehand. This is where having a good vision and mission and clear principles makes you agile. Because you say, okay, these were the assumptions that we went into for this next this next milestone in the roadmap, and the feedback is different. We got punched in the face. You sit down during the break, and the coach said, okay, why is it not working? Why is what we've prepared not working? And then you can tweak, but you're not going to throw your strategy out the window. You're going to say, listen, maybe you need to slip more left and then do the strategy. Do more 1, 2, 3. Change it up. Change your stance, right? So this is the paradox that we don't understand. Creating a future state, a plan, a detailed roadmap is a lot of work.
Yes.
Without 100% guarantee for success.
Yeah.
But it still requires, as Deming once said, plan, do, check, act.
Yes.
Plan, do, check, act. And a good strategic plan must have a huge element of agility, but it also must have a huge backbone of predictive vision, mission, and guidelines.
I've seen many plans in my career, and I'm pretty sure I did not even see one plan that worked out. Yeah, but
did they achieve the actual end goal? Yeah,
most of the time. But what was the success criteria? Mm-hmm. The success criteria is, with a plan, you can measure the deviation, and as soon as you deviate from what you were planning to do, you can set actions to bring you back to plan. Yeah. And now I'm happy with Agile, because if the actions to take to bring me back to the plan can be different. If we're going to the west and there's a thunderstorm, we might not be in the position going via train, but we need to take the bicycle or whatever. Yeah. But this doesn't change the basic plan to go to the west.
I'm going to go even a step further, because the lack of clear transparency on all levels of the organization, so involving the whole organization in strategic implementation on their level, is important.
Yeah.
Understanding the level above me and below me so that I can integrate is important. But if you don't create this level of transparency, and also accept that transparency is going to disappoint you.
Yes.
Okay. The problem in German we call it Schönfärberei, which means to paint it a pretty color if it's off. The problem with that, and if you look at a lot of these large capital projects like Airport Berlin or Stuttgart 21 or the Sydney Opera House that cost 10 times, Sydney Opera House cost 100 times more than it was supposed to. 100 times.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, even if you look at the original budget and timeline that they conceived back in the 1950s, 60s, you would say that's unreal. I think the original estimate was like 7 million Australian dollars. And I don't know anything about building buildings, but I know you can't build an opera house that looks like that for 7 million, right?
I would just say so, yeah.
So, and there's political things that are taking place there. But the problem with this is, instead of having in place a staff position like a PMO that does portfolio management and contributes and shows and creates this transparency and communicates it openly, which is painful because it's embarrassing,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And celebrating that transparency says, okay, we're off, but let's navigate it. Let's work with it. Mm-hmm. The difference is, and this is what I often say, if a project is, let's keep it simple, 3 times more expensive than it was originally planned, mm-hmm. had they dealt with it in an honest, transparent way, it might have been 20% more expensive than 300 times more expensive. Because the not dealing honestly on all levels creates even more mistakes and even more redundancy and even more wasted time.
Yes.
You know? So I think this paradox is something that we all have to come to terms with. You need a plan. Your plan is not absolute. Having a plan doesn't mean you're going to hit a bullseye, but it hopefully guarantees that you hit the dartboard and don't throw it in the wrong direction. And it doesn't cost 200, 300 times more than it should, right? And it's a guideline. And, you know, this is another phenomenon that I often have. If you look at a lot of the projects, for example, the airport in Berlin, I don't care how much more expensive that it was. Is it working? Is it fulfilling its purpose?
From my experience, the higher the level in the organization is, your position is, the larger becomes the part of what we call in project management the topic change management. And when you are on an executive level, you don't do anything else besides defining vision and strategy. But that's nothing you do every day different because this needs to be stable. But you need to manage the change all the time to achieve the large-term goals. So what do you think is the reason why strategy is such a difficult topic for organizations? Various reasons. First reason, as we are in a culture where everything needs to be fast and agile and so on, nobody takes the time to really determine the baseline. Yeah, to where to start from.
Not only where to start from, but also what the target is, the golden target, right?
So this is the first thing. Second thing is, as we outlined already, executives often are not interested, or their contracts are not in a way that they would be asked to really do it, because they are more in optimization of their own financials, what is understandable, but not to the benefit of the company. Yeah. So, second thing. Third thing is, in our corporate culture, I'm missing the understanding that executives need to be visionaries. Yeah. And that it is not about managing daily business, because therefore I have my second, third line stuff, whatever, but really to bring the company into the future direction. Yeah. I think this will be the three things I'm currently seeing.
If you were to give anybody who's listening, regardless on what level of management they are in, even if it's a small company, what would be some of the advice that you would give? What do companies need to do to embrace strategic development, regardless of whether they're using Balanced Scorecard or value chain or whatever model they're using for it? What would be some of the recommendations you would give them?
Out of experience, the companies who had the most benefit at the end, and that's something I want to highlight, were the ones that were very critical to themselves.
So self-reflected?
Yes, and completely honest.
Yeah.
So they spend a lot of time in the baseline, really understanding how their business works, also what went wrong in the past and what they would need to change. They often had, let's say, longer drawdown to come over, but this longer drawdown affected in Phoenix climb at the end, because they cut away everything that was not necessary, which is very painful. Also from a personal perspective, because as a leader, you are confronted with very frustrated people. Yeah, you need to make them clear that things will go away. They laugh because they have been there forever, but they are not necessary for the future.
What you're saying is triggering some of the buzzwords that are out there. The topic of, and I think this is also where executives have a responsibility, is defining culture. Or supporting culture, which means how do we deal with mistakes? What does it mean to make a mistake? Is it? Yeah, I believe it. I'm a big fan of I'm overly critical. I judge everything, right? I judge myself 10 times more than I judge others, but I judge, but I don't judge to be prejudiced.
Yeah.
I don't condemn for what I always ask myself the question, is this good for us or is this bad for us? And if it's bad for us, okay, it's gone. What are we going to learn from? How are we going to change from? This classical agile model. Do we want to keep it? Do we want to increase the things we're doing? Do we want to stop the things we're doing? Do we want to start new things to compensate for it? I think this you never lose if you don't lose the lesson attached. And I think this is part of what executive responsibility, in the sake of supporting a conducive culture where people feel motivated, directed to participate. Also feel responsible, but they don't break down in fear. Oh my God, who's going to be blamed? Who are we going to blame? Because I think one of the things we have in traditional project management is this kind of whipping boy mentality where we don't learn from our mistakes. We blame somebody, right? Because only one person is responsible for what the system did wrong.
And I think the important part in there is, as an executive, to be also open for criticism, because sometimes the people who are doing the job see things you don't see. Yeah. And they must not fear to come to you.
Well, not only that, if you have a leader who has the humility and the fortitude to take feedback, even if it exposes them to a certain extent, and roll with the punches, to take the punch.
Yeah.
And come back. I think Both my kids are tennis players. My older one was actually competitive for quite some time, and one of the biggest challenges he was an incredible tennis player. He used to win the first set against good players, usually 6-0, and then the second set he would start falling apart because he started second guessing. He was afraid, what if I make a mistake? And tennis, like boxing and also like golf, those are three sports that are really psychologically difficult on you, because tennis, for example, you can be leading, you can be the better tennis player by miles than your opponent. You can be leading 6-0 and 5-0 and you can still lose the match.
Yes.
And the other way around, you can still win the match.
Yes.
Right? And I think it's in particular in our modern world, and I think the new Generation Z, can contribute to this, but they need the guidance of generations that passed that still have this understanding, this depth of knowledge to say, listen, we're going to make mistakes, but we learn from our mistakes. That's hugely important.
If you take the metaphor of the tennis player and bring it into business context, and we're talking about mission and vision, take it as an example. What is the mission of a tennis player? The mission of the tennis player is he loves to do it because this is what he feels makes him happy, whatever. Yeah, that's why he does it. What's the vision of the tennis player? Maybe I'm just fantasizing. In year 2026, winning Wimbledon. In 28, maybe being number one in the list. Yeah. And what is so clear in terms of a sportsman is not, or obviously not so clear in terms of business.
Yeah, I think defining vision and mission is really much more difficult than we think. I would, if sometimes I have to think about what the questions. I would probably say because I just recently I follow some professional tennis coaches on Instagram, and one of them recently said, I think it was Agassi who actually said, you should not dream of being number one. I would disagree with that. I think he probably dreamt of it. I think the vision is, I think it helps you to say, either I want to be a professional top 10 tennis player, or I want to win a Grand Slam to leave it open, or even if they say I want to win. I think that vision is good. I think the mission needs to be to be the best possible tennis player I can, and portfolio management to tie this in would be to say, what are my capabilities? I'm going Balanced Scorecard a little bit. What are my capabilities? What tournaments are out there? How much do I get for each tournament? How many of these tournaments do I have to play where I can win? How many of these? They say, okay, I've got 1,000 tournaments. I can't play 1,000 tournaments. No. So how many of which tournaments am I going to? So to create a clear roadmap on a granular annual level, what matches I'm going to play them through, and then they were coming to the next level, to have the resilience to say, listen, in the beginning I'm going to lose. I love this from martial arts, this classical saying, the novice has lost once or twice, a master has lost 1,000 times. The proportion of winning, or the number of winning, is proportional to the number of losses that you have. The more you're willing to lose and learn, the more you can move forward. But once again, this is a level of transparency I think that a lot of us are culturally not mature enough for yet, because of the embarrassment, because of shame, who's to blame, that whole different thing. I liked something you just said. I hope that there's something in there.
No, especially in comparison when you said, which of the tournaments do I need to play? Yeah. Do you know how often I'm asking my customers, who is your customer? Well, clear, our customer is, okay, and then do some framing. Who or what are the attributes of the persons or companies you want to be your customer?
Like a persona, right? Yeah.
Do you know how hard it is for them when they are asked like this to specify it?
Should I tell you what I think one of my suspicions is, why that is, why there's such an ingranularity about defining these things and why it's so difficult? Because the knowledge is distributed over the whole organization, and we don't do enough management by walking around. We often don't do cross-training where I used to work for companies where they used to move managers and employees around from departments. You'd spend 2 months in that department so you would learn. I think the other reason is And part of the reason is that you sometimes, you jump into a company that you don't know. That's one other. But I think one of the driving factors is a number one reason why a lot of companies are successful. A big share of it is, yes, they did good things. Yes, they have capabilities, but at the factor of luck. I think a lot of companies do a lot of great business, although a lot of what they do is pretty crappy.
Yes, I agree. But what I'm telling my customers is, if you're honest enough to recognize what you just said, turn the luck into planning and start, as long as you have money and your market position, to turn luck into planning.
I'm gonna take a little bit of what I said back before because it's too black and white. I don't think if I say that, and let's put it. I'm gonna be more direct here. I think every company does a lot of things that are crappy. The question is the proportion, the balance, the proportion, right? And I think you can get by a long time having a 60-40 split. But how long? I think the real proposition of what we're talking about here is upping your game and really professionalizing your balanced scorecard, creating a transparency and integrated strategic approach to it, and including and using staff positions like PMOs and doing the process of portfolio management where you integrate financial, product, and project portfolio. It's a lot of work, but it's a small step cost in the sense of going from a 60-40 balance to a 70-30 or an 80-20. And I think this is what the market has always told us. And I think the reason why companies like Tesla and stuff are taking the lead is because for years companies have been telling themselves why it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Until somebody comes along and says, well, let me show you how it does work.
See, when you're saying, what about, let's say, the crappy things in the company? As you know, I'm a large fan of Pareto principle. And what I really learned in my time is 80% of the effects or the benefits you gain with 20% of the efforts. The last or remaining 20% would cost 80% of efforts to still do it. And this is not the goal. And
it's finding that balance. You don't have to have the best hamburger to be the number one salesperson of hamburgers, McDonald's. But you have the overall picture. Okay. I love to use McDonald's as an example. I don't like McDonald's, but I'm impressed by them. They understand something that most of us don't understand. Number one seller of hamburgers. You can name 10 other companies that sell a better hamburger, but none of them can do what McDonald's does, because if you ask people, does McDonald's have quality? Most people would say no. But you and I know they have quality. They just understand quality in a more comprehensive, integrated fashion. It's like a diamond with many facets. They have drive-thrus. They own their properties. They have a payment structure which is fair. They're all over the place. They're a logistic giant that can produce the same mediocre product in 120 different countries around the world.
I think we need to differentiate here on the type of quality, because what you're referring now is the service quality. The service quality is top. Yeah. The product quality might be something,
but even the product quality is in line with the price.
Yeah.
See, this is what most people don't take into. They say, if it's not Kobe beef, it's not the best hamburger.
Agreed.
But who wants to pay for Kobe beef?
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about that.
Yeah.
So this I think if we're going to use, and I think we often use this in project management or in portfolio management, the understanding that leadership means being a conductor of an orchestra often. It helps if you know how to play an instrument. It's amazing if you can play more than one instrument, but nobody cares because that's not your job. Your job is not to play the violin. Your job is to understand when the violin should play, how they should play, guide people, make sure they play in harmony, and then they're not beating each other up. And this is what we're kind of also not just activating, talking about on a portfolio or a program level, but this is also something that senior managers and executives. Let's kind of see if we can create. We've gone a little bit into the balanced scorecard. We've talked a little bit about strategy. We've spent a long time talking harshly or judgmentally about executives, but we love you. We're on your side. We understand that you have one of the most difficult jobs out there. Quietly, honestly, I can completely understand when a senior manager said, do I want to be promoted to an executive? Hell no. It's a difficult position. There's too few of you for the job that you have to do. But if we were to kind of make it interesting. In German, we say schmackhaft machen, right? To make it. What would be another way to summarize? Why should an executive have a portfolio manager? Why should an executive have an executive PMO that supports him or her?
Why should he have a portfolio manager? Because he needs somebody who helps him selecting the actions to be taken to evolve the company to the targets he or she identified in their vision. This cannot be done in a one-man show because you need to take the project ideas or the possible project programs to be executed, compare it to what you can achieve in terms of availability of resources, either persons and skills on the one hand side or financial ones on the other hand side, and then to develop a plan how to achieve the vision goals for, let's say, certain years. Yeah, this cannot be done by a one-man show. And this brings me to a second question, namely, what about the, let's say, people behind in terms of PMOs or portfolio management offices, however you call them? Well, somebody needs to collect the data to make it evaluable. You can not evaluate something you do not have.
I think what a lot of people do not come to grip with is how big the gray workforce is. I call it the gray workforce, right? Yeah. These are the unseen, underappreciated, overworked, and often underpaid people in the background that have your back, that will slip you that note when you need the information, which will provide you, will give you an oversight, will give you the transparent. Creating transparency is a difficult thing.
And there is another thing they do, which is completely underestimated. Not a single project manager would report anything if there wouldn't be a person behind saying, "Come on, yeah."
Well, also if they don't know what's in it for them, right? If it's just for a punitive purpose,
you need the working force to get the data.
You know the classical when they say, at a certain airport, we won't mention which one. They used to have the term there, Flughafen Rot. Yeah, you ever heard this? The Ampel system, the traffic light system where you would give your status report. So the project manager goes to the sponsor and says, our project is yellow, and or deep red, right? And then the sponsor would go to the executive steering committee and say, the project is light orange. And then the executive steering committee goes to the senior vice president and said it's light yellow. And then the senior vice president goes to the CEO and says it's bright green. This is the danger with reporting systems if there's not an integrated approach where transparency doesn't just punish all, but benefits all. I don't think transparency is there for punishment. I think it's there so that we can see what we're doing.
And to extend it a bit, I did it in my past that when I thought the project I was leading was red, I went to the sponsor and said, I am red. Yeah. And often they said, are you crazy? If we report,
you can't say that.
Yeah. You can't say that. If you report this in the board meeting, they will kill us. Yeah. And I said, great, because we need the attention.
Yeah. See, that's what most people don't understand. And this is culture. And this needs to be supported from the very top. We were kind of talking with our film crew during the breaks that we have to put in because these cameras heat up, and they were saying, listen, we're understanding this. We think is great, but how long are you guys going to go for? We're like, we can go for hours. And we will be going for hours, but we're gonna probably cut this shorter than we could content-wise. I think we're gonna have plenty of opportunities maybe to do another podcast. I think what I'd like to do before we kind of slowly close out, I think if you were to appeal to the people that are listening, can you maybe summarize why should not only executives but all levels of an organization be interested in strategy, which includes the balanced scorecard, vision, mission, value chain? Why should they be interested in portfolios? Why should they have portfolio management? And then I guess the last statement kind of goes hand in hand with the second one, which is you need somebody who's going to do it, and that's a PMO. So look into the camera and give them your best pitch. So the first question is, why doesn't it? Because a lot of executives say, strategy is old-fashioned. No, right? We still need strategy. Why?
Definitely not. Yeah. For a very simple reason, because the world is not static. Yeah, it changes every day.
But isn't, because it's not static, that the reason that strategy doesn't work anymore?
I would say it is the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah, because that the world is not static. It's just the reason why a company needs to evolve over time.
So you need a better strategy, is what you're saying. A more refined strategy, more agile. Use a good bingo word.
I need a strategy to comply with the requirements of the future.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what we also said or always said when we were talking now. No? You need to set the baseline where I am as of today. I need to have an understanding or assumptions how the world will develop. Then I need to develop a vision where me or the company I'm working with should be in this vision of the evolving world. And then to make a plan, a classic plan, and developing the, let's say, year goals is nothing different.
So
than
let me
to achieve it.
Let me say this differently. But what you're saying very distinctly is, and I think people feel that they hope that this is true.
Yeah.
But what you're saying as kind of a shimmer of hope in the background, this is something systematic that can be learned with a process.
Absolutely.
And you're in a position to help people learn this capability.
Of course, that's my job.
That's where the segue is. We have the online academy, which we're launching January or end of January 2025, where we're going to have a number of different programs. And one of our biggest programs will be the PMO program, where we will have up to 38 different modules. One will be strategy, one will be portfolio management, where you were kind of chomping at the bit during the break where you say, listen, Mark, there's still so much I'd love to tell our listeners. Will I have the opportunity? And I said, well, yeah, you will have the opportunity. Markus is one of our key trainers and subject matter experts for the academy. So if anything on here that you hear that you like, you will be.
Yeah, of course.
He will be virtual presence, whatever you need. We'll definitely also put your contact information from LinkedIn on.
The point is we're just scraping at the surface.
Yes.
Yeah, we are far not.
You're not crapping, you're scraping. Sorry.
Scraping, sorry.
Just make sure that we. We can crap too, but we're scraping at the surface. So that's on the strategy. So that's a topic that we haven't sufficiently done a deep dive on, but we're going to do in a format that's becoming of the detail with slides and all that kind of stuff. The second question that I had is, do we really need portfolio? What would be your pitch to executives to reconsider? Do we have a portfolio management, and why do they need it?
Just answering them a simple question. If you would decide not to have portfolio management, how would you control the change of your company?
I would almost say I'm a big fan of stupid analogies, or simple analogies, not stupid ones. It's like if I'm flying a plane, having 500 different buttons to push doesn't necessarily help you, but having no buttons to push is even worse.
Yes.
So I think the key to portfolio management is it enables you from on a very primal level to create a dashboard where you can measure your input and your output.
And there is one important thing with the input and the output, namely the cause and effect. To make a portfolio work in terms that you really steer the future of your company has, on the one hand side, as a baseline, as we said before, the scorecard saying how are the dependencies. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, and here we are in the portfolio management, they need to understand what do they change in this cause-effect situations with executing which of the projects and programs to steer the effects in the right direction. And that's why you need them.
And you're using very distinct language, but the problem is also confusing to a lot of people. There's too many different forms of vocabulary, the same thing. We have OKR, which we haven't been able to get into. The terms that I like to use, and I think this is one of the key aspects of more detailed portfolio management, we can take a look at the portfolio module, is projects create outputs, not outcomes. That's short term. Yes. Outcomes hopefully affect outcomes, which is actually what sponsors want. Sponsors don't really care about outputs, they care about outcomes.
Yep.
Those are midterm. And then this is where it gets challenging, and this is where strategy and the Balanced Scorecard comes in. Why are we doing this all? Because of impact. And if we identify that every change initiative has an input, an output, hopefully an outcome, outcome, a positive one, and an impact, and managing this complex environment with a backbone of measurements of KPIs and dashboards, that's the actual function of a portfolio manager. So I've noticed that a lot of my companies are either renaming their PMOs or even considering getting rid of them because they don't know what to do with them. They don't know what the next fad will be. What would be how would you advocate for a PMO and let a company, does a modern company still need a PMO?
The short answer, yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. The long answer, with a very simple comparison. If a company believes that the business model it has right now is perfect and stable and won't change over the next 10 years.
No black swans.
Please get rid of your PMO. You don't need it.
Yeah.
But if you believe that your company needs to evolve to be competitive also in 10 years from now, you will probably have the need to change processes, products within your organization. And if you feel this change, you are lost without a PMO.
Mm. I would even go, if we're going to take a look at the AI concept, I think that if you're really in a very stable environment, a classic commodity market where the thing is, repetitive and is not going to change that much, I think maybe you could probably automate some of the stuff that you would do with AI.
Probably yes, but frankly speaking, I see the topic AI much overrated.
I'm with you, but I'm the contingency that I'm saying here, or the premise is, if it's simple.
Yeah,
it's simple. Once again, I think AI is great. I use it, but it's not intelligent. But it's fast, and I think I think it could relieve us, because one of the dangers of PMO is the justification for the time and the resources. I think if you're in a dynamic market, it's a small investment for having a higher probability of success. So one thing, I'm a hardcore idealist. One element of our podcast is that I always make recommendation for books. A lot of people don't have time to read books, but I still think they're valuable for our education. Is there a particular book that you would recommend if people say, I want to get a little bit more details? I think there's even one book that you helped write, right?
Well, if you are interested how you define visions, missions, and bring it down in terms of portfolio management and then reeling into details, I can recommend the book. It's called Strategist Projektmanagement.
Is it only in German or also in English?
I'm afraid it's only in German.
Then that's for the German-speaking people. That's fine.
Yeah. And you're right, the chapter who is dealing with how to define strategies and breaking it down into a portfolio has been written by me.
Yeah, so we're not going to call him Dr. Strange, we're going to call him Dr. Strategist. He's our expert on that. So I have also picked out some books that I would recommend. I don't know if recommend is the right word. These are books that I would recommend that are out there. There's a lot of books out there. Wiley Verlag, or the Wiley Guide, is a good place to start. Project Program Portfolio Management. This is a good kind of starter kit. It's fairly easy to read. It of course has graphics and some bullet points. It's easy to digest. It's not going to rock your world, but it's a good start. I like this book right here because it goes into what we didn't have that much time to get into, which was the KPI kind of element.
Well, we still should.
And maybe we'll have an opportunity to do a follow-up on this. This right here is a book called the Project Management Scorecard by Jack Phillips, Timothy Bothell, and Lynn Sneed. Measuring the Success of Project Management Solutions. I think this is a great, simple book. Sometimes gets a little bit complex, but otherwise it's fairly straightforward. The one book that I mentioned to you that kind of drives this home, you can take a look at this afterwards, is The Business Model Generation. This is a different variation of the Balanced Scorecard. It asks a lot of those questions, right? So it's based on a very simple graphic where it says, who are your key partners? What are your key activities? What are your key resources? What is your value proposition? What are your customer relations? What are your channels? What are your customer segments? What is your cost structure? And what are your revenue systems? Sounds a lot like Balanced Scorecard, doesn't it? Right? Absolutely. So it's a different take. And once again, you can reinvent the wheel, and there's no harm in it. But we would recommend you, if you're going to have to do this, don't reinvent the wheel. There's plenty of good examples out there. You can't talk about project management without talking about Harold Kurtzner. I've had one of his longtime pupils, Al Zaytoun, on the podcast. I'm hoping that I can still get Professor Kurtzner to come on my podcast. Maybe he has to get to know me first. Strategic planning for project management using the project management maturity model. There's many different maturity models. We're going to be going through this also in the academy. We'll be taking a look at this. This one I want to say because it's my favorite one. There's another one here called Portfolio Management for New Product. I like this book here because what this does, it kind of creates the link. I think you cannot, project portfolio management does not make any sense unless you create an integrated link to financial and product portfolio, which kind of makes the responsibility. And then I'm going to say really one of my favorite books. I've also talked to this gentleman, a great guy, a French gentleman by the name of Philippe Houssaire. Great guy, very, very humble, very, very, very knowledgeable. I've also invited him on a podcast. He declined, not because he didn't like the podcast, but he says he didn't want to expose himself with his opinion. Maybe if you see some of these podcasts, you'll see that we're ready to speak openly. Great guy. What I love about this book here, High Impact PMO. Let me say something generally about any PMO book. If you take any one of these books, there's always a certain systematic concept, a framework, a process behind it, which makes it kind of obvious. But what I like about this is Philip has really taken kind of a creative approach, and his titles are completely unexpected, right? The value of complexity sciences is one of the chapters that's in here, right? He really has an extended kind of, who's the guy who wrote the book? I'll think of it in just a moment. A famous Italian author, or he's like, he thinks a little bit outside the book. The value of human dynamics, right? High impact PMO is one of the chapters. He really looks at it, value of indirect strategies, right? So he looks at the PMO approach from a kind of overhead perspective. Listen, PMO is a systematic process and system framework, but above and beyond that, there's a lot of intelligence that goes into it. And that's what this book deals with. Definitely recommend this book. Philip, shout out to you. I want to say, Markus, it's been a pleasure. How long have we been going?
Almost 2 hours.
Almost 2 hours? We could probably go even longer than that. Do you guys have any questions?
Nothing that would fit in here.
Okay. So what I love about Rico and Nelly, they're great people and great filmers, is they're kind of our benchmark to see if we're putting you all to sleep. You guys sleeping yet? No, you're awake? Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Markus, thanks a lot. You have an open invitation to a follow-up to this.
Thank you already for this invitation.
Yeah. But before that, we're also working on your strategy module and your portfolio module for the PMO certification and education program that will be on our 2025 Academy online site. Thanks a lot for your time. If you've watched this far, I will applaud you. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. And thanks a lot for your time.